Today we're going to talk about how Republicans made a fatal mistake during their latest power grab that may very well have signed their own death certificate. And I interview AOC about the Republicans blaming Democrats for not saving Kevin McCarthy, how she was instrumental in getting the New York Attorney General probe started against Trump that's resulted in the trial that we're watching right now, and whether she believes there will ever be another Biden impeachment inquiry hearing after the disaster that was the first one. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're watching No Lie. So these last few weeks, objectively speaking, have ranked somewhere between dumpster fire and the Hindenburg for Republicans. First, from the disaster that was the impeachment inquiry hearing against Joe Biden, where their own witnesses conceded that there was no justification to be there, to just days ago when Kevin McCarthy, who became Speaker under the most humiliating of circumstances, was then stripped of that position in a way that was equally, if not more, humiliating. And let's be clear, all of this is very much a function of the disinformation machine that powers right-wing media and that serves as a North Star for far-right House Freedom Caucus members. This does nothing for the vast majority of Republicans, or at least the minority of Republicans who still claim to be moderate. And so the question really becomes, why are Republicans allowing this to happen? Why are they pandering to the extremists within their own ranks by allowing this failure theater, those are Matt Gaetz's own words, when it just hangs the rest of the party out to dry? And the answer is that the priority on the right has shifted to winning primaries. House Republicans know that if they don't kowtow to the farthest right fringes of their base, that they'll be primaried. And so rather than having a spine and speaking out, they defer to just keeping their jobs, meaning that they have to tack right to avoid being primaried by the next Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert. And so the question then becomes, well, won't they just lose in the general? And that's where gerrymandering comes in. Republican legislatures have spent the last decades redrawing their states' maps to allow for maximum advantage for Republicans. Democratic voters are just packed into one or two massively Democratic districts, and the rest of the state is basically just safe red districts. So you don't need to moderate your positions to win. In fact, it's the opposite. You actually need to show off your right-wing bona fides, since your general election race is hardly any different from the primary. One top Republican campaign strategist in the 2000 and 2002 elections, Tom Davis, came out and said, "We ran our caucus to basically support members in swing districts. That's how we got power." Today, they run the caucus now to protect members from R+30 districts to protect them in primaries. And so what we're left with is a House Republican conference that's just getting more extreme and less likely to accept any modicum of compromise. What they refuse to recognize is that while they're out there trying to shore up their next primary win, there actually are still some moderate Republicans who are being hung out to dry. Right now, in a House with a 5-seat Republican majority, there are still 18 Republicans serving in Biden-won districts. And yet, instead of protecting those vulnerable members, without whom there would be no House majority, the extremists are introducing messaging bills that have zero chance of becoming law, but still put those moderates on record having to cast their ballots for legislation that'll be fodder for attack ads if they vote for it, and primary threats if they vote against it. Not a great strategy if your goal is to help those people keep their seats and to keep the party in its majority. I don't know, maybe the smart thing to do would be to protect those vulnerable members instead of constantly putting them in a position where they have to align themselves with the lunatics of the Republican Party. And yet the incentive structure for the extremists to do their extremism is just too great. They need the attention. They need the 5-minute Fox hit. They need the fundraising pitch. They need the social media followers. And so regardless of the fact that they're putting their majority, and therefore any real semblance of power, at risk in real time, still they barrel forward because they have created a system where they can bolster primary wins or protect the moderates, but not both. And the folks protecting themselves in the primaries here have all the power. And it goes without saying, but there is zero chance of any governing happening, because even if those people do manage to pass one of their bills that look like they were drawn up in the comments section of a Dan Bongino Facebook video, they are DOA in a Democratic Senate and with a Democratic president. But again, they don't care because it's not about working together, it's not about bipartisanship, it's not about governing, it is about winning a primary. It's about appealing to the farthest right fringes of the base, and those people don't care about governing. Which is why, when Democrats had the exact same margin that Republicans currently have, they passed the Inflation Reduction Act, the American Rescue Plan, the Infrastructure Package, the Gun Safety Law, the PACT Act, the CHIPS Act, reauthorized the Violence Against Women Act, codified marriage equality into federal law. But with that same size majority, Republicans have passed zero meaningful legislation and still don't even have a speaker. In the last 30 years, the government shut down 6 times. All of them were at the hands of Republicans. I don't know how to make this any more clear. Not only can't these people govern, but they don't want to. The incentive isn't there. They're there for a lot of things, for fame, attention, social media followers, fundraising, power, but governing isn't one of them. And given where Republicans are now putting their resources, it's only going to get worse. Something to think about regardless of which party you're in when you're deciding whose salaries you want to pay with your hard-earned tax dollars. Here's a preview of my interview with AOC. We are right now in the midst of this speaker battle, just more chaos and dysfunction within the Republican conference in the House. Some Republicans are trying to cast the blame on Democrats for not swooping in and saving Kevin McCarthy as he was being ousted as Speaker. Can I have your thoughts on that? Is it Democrats' responsibility to save Republicans from themselves?
Almost never in the history of the House of Representatives has a party voted for the other party's speaker. That is not part of the function, tradition, or even structure of the House of Representatives. In fact, one would say that part of the essential structure of the party structure is to elect your own party speaker. And so, of course, every Democrat is going to vote for Hakeem Jeffries to be Speaker of the House, and it is the Republican responsibility to elect the Republican speaker. But even taking a step beyond that, for folks who say, why can't we, meet in the middle or cut a deal? Kevin McCarthy didn't even try. He at no point asked Democrats to vote for him, tried to negotiate anything for there to be some sort of coalition government. It really seemed that this expectation, frankly, that Democrats would vote for Republicans was something that was learned after the fact.
Obviously, the indication that they're trying to give is that surely if Republicans were in the minority and they had to vote for a speaker, that they would vote to protect Hakeem Jeffries and not vote to elect somebody in the Republican Party, right?
I mean, let's be real. Do we really think any Republican would have voted for Nancy Pelosi for Speaker of the House? That kind of answers the question right there.
What do you say to the pro-McCarthy Republicans who say Democrats are just as responsible for the chaos now as Matt Gaetz is?
Well, I think that Democrats tried to save Republicans from themselves. There was this entire rule that allowed for one member of the House to try to kick out the Speaker of the House was something that was adopted by Republicans in January of this year. Every single Democrat voted against this rule. We said this is bad for the institution. This is not going to be good for you all. And they didn't listen. They voted for this. They put this structure into place. And, all we can say is that we tried. We did try.
The reason that Matt Gaetz led this mutiny against Kevin McCarthy was because at the end of the day, the government was allowed to stay open. But at the end of this 45-day continuing resolution, whoever replaces Kevin McCarthy is going to come out of this knowing that the only lesson that he or she should learn is that there should be no cooperation, no capitulation, and that they have to be as extreme as possible because at this point, that's quite literally the only qualification now. So does the prospect of that worry you moving forward?
Well, it goes both ways. Just as Matt Gaetz and his crew can threaten to withhold their votes, you can also have 5 or 6 courageous Republicans on the other side of that spectrum also hold their leadership's feet to the fire and say, we have to have sanity in this situation, we can't bow to extremism, and we need to work together. And the question here is if there are any Republicans in the Republican Party, even those in swing seats, that, seats that have elected for both Joe Biden and elected a Republican member of Congress, if those folks will stand up and really try to strengthen our democracy as strongly as these rebels are, trying to kind of destruct their own party.
Yeah, right. Like the responsibility always, it's basically never on those 18 Republicans, for example, who are currently sitting in Biden-won districts to do anything to defend the Republican Party. It's always the Democrats' fault that we didn't swoop in, and yet we have these moderate Republicans, so-called moderate Republicans, or Republicans who should be worried about saving their own seats. And at the end of the day, it's them who capitulate to the extremists in the Republican conference.
Yeah, and perhaps this party of personal responsibility and lifting yourself up by the bootstraps, take some personal responsibility and lift themselves up by the bootstraps.
So the news now is that Donald Trump has come forward and endorsed Jim Jordan. He's also come forward and says that if the Republican conference isn't able to choose anybody, that he would be willing to step in for a short period of time to swoop in as the white knight of the Republican Party. What is your reaction to the prospect of Donald Trump serving as Speaker of the House?
I think someone should let Trump know that the speakership does not make you immune to a court challenge or federal investigation, and also that this job is literally a lot of work and you can't have executive time until noon.
To check out the full interview with AOC, click the thumbnail right here on the screen or check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel. You can also listen to the audio version of this episode by clicking that link on the screen. And finally, to see more of my content, the subscribe link is on the screen as well.